Yeah, it's always a pleasure to discuss and talk about the science of the body itself, the human anatomy and alchemy, to blend it. It's always nice to have somebody who is versed in the world of the muscles, the bones, and the different aspects of the body, and to fuse it together with this internal alchemy, so we can get a good overview and a proper understanding. So I look forward to this one, but also through the rest of the year as well, because when because we be breaking parts down, we're breaking down part of a whole system. So really, by the time we complete, we should have a true understanding of the whole mechanism of the human body and the different aspects of the human body in order to energize, vitalize, the whole being. So I'm well looking forward to this. And we can, as Chris has said, ask questions because we're going to do, say, like a half an hour presentation where I'll be asking questions to Christos as well. We'll be discussing a few moments in between the presentation. We'll also give a moment for question and answers at the end, but you can ask a question at any time because questions give clarity. And a lot of the time, everyone else is thinking the same question that you're thinking, but no one want to ask it. And it just sometimes, because the information is vast, sometimes we just skim past certain things because we're looking at another aspect of it. So ask a question at any time. Well, all right. In saying that, I think we are good to go, Christos.
All right, so let me just get on the presentation, and I'm just going to see if I can share my screen. So if I make that bigger, and screen share. Let's see here.
Yeah, we can see that.
All right, perfect. Looks like up and running now. So the pelvic floor muscles. All right, so yeah, what we will do for the first part of it, we'll have a brief look at what the pelvic floor muscles is, the function, the muscles of the pelvic floor, things that can go wrong with the pelvic floor, and then looking at things that we can do to put the pelvic floor right. So what are the pelvic floor muscles? So when you're looking at the pelvic floor muscles, it is part that makes up that, core muscle. When we're talking about the core muscle, we're not talking about the fancy ones on the outside, even though that is part of the core muscles, but we're talking about the core of the core muscles, the core of our being. And when we're looking at these muscles are very important for things like breathing, respiration. These things are important for holding our organs in the right place. So the four core muscles, the pelvic floor being one of them, we've got here our transverse abdominals at the front. Then we've got at the back our multifidi muscles, or what we call our paraspinal muscles. They make up part of the paraspinal. At the top, we have our diaphragm, which is here. And at the very bottom, we have the muscle, which is known as our pelvic floor muscles. Interestingly enough, just like this, the top bit is called the diaphragm. The bottom is called our pelvic diaphragm. So these four muscles are very, very important. So what are the pelvic muscles for, the pelvic floor muscles? What are its functions? So as you can see here with the diagram, that's just a simple diagram of what our pelvic floor is. And one of its jobs is to hold everything in place. As we will talk about in the next slides, when the pelvic floor muscles are weak, when they're not doing their job properly, then they cause a lot of problems such as prolapse, bladder problems, bowel problems, etc., and also a lot of pain in the core. Yeah, so they're also good not just for supporting the pelvic organs, but also for our whole sexual function, childbirth, etc. So let's have a closer look at the anatomy of the pelvic floor muscles. So I am going to share another screen just to make it a little bit interesting. So if I stop sharing that, and I am going to
Get involved in the muscles now, yeah?
Yeah. So, first thing, let me just drag that a little bit across. So when we're actually looking at the pelvic floor muscles, one of the first things that we can notice is just looking at how we've got a type of funnel shape going on, so looking at the pelvic floor, it's like cutting the body open and kind of like looking directly at the bottom of us. And we can see that there's this nice bowl shape that forms.
That's right.
And all of these muscles can contract differently, and they have their own, contraction and their own role and responsibility. So for example, if I go over to, let's come from the back, it's a little bit easier.
Yeah, because it's beautiful how you can see the attachment into the coccyx and the way in which when you contract that, your pelvic floor, you're contracting directly your coccyx space. It shows it beautifully.
So here we've got these muscles. So when we're looking at the pelvic floor muscles, they're basically broken down into two parts, the levator ani and the coccygeus muscle, yeah? I can never pronounce them properly, but that's what we're going through with right now. So when you're looking at the levator ani, in fact, I just want you to appreciate the shape first. I'm going to point out to you just how we've got different aspects of these muscles here. So when we're looking at, and then I'll break it that make it easier, but we look at them in their separateness first. And apologies, because this is not my iPad, it would have been easier to get everything in the right place. So let's see here. So we got the pubo-coccygeus muscle. And when we're looking at this muscle specifically, and remember they've got their pairs, this muscle helps in regards to supporting the prostate for men, for women, supporting the vagina. It's also, helpful for the contraction in, men getting an erection, etc. And that contributes to that aspect. But also when we're looking at female and the birthing process, and even during pregnancy, it just helps to position the head of the fetus. And when we're looking at these muscles, puboanalis or puborectus, I believe is the other name for it. When we're looking at this muscle, you can see how it kind of surrounds, the anus, basically. And in the way it just surrounds it, it helps in the whole process of, maintaining our fecal continence. Because if that muscle's not working quite correctly, then that's when we get all the incontinence, the accidents, etc. And then we're over here, we've got other various muscles like the iliococcygeus muscle, which is again very important in to stabilize that pelvic floor. It helps to anchor that muscle. It helps to anchor the whole of that pelvic floor system and the perineum. And then over here, we've got the coccygeus muscle. And again, that helps with the overall support. So when the pressure of our whole internal pressure, our inter-abdominal pressure, when that increases, and let's just say we're really bursting to go to the toilet or something like that, then also this muscle kicks in just to help maintain some of our continence. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come out of that screen, but it's just to really give you an appreciation of the shape, the size of these muscles, and just really
Also,
examine that, it's making up that whole bowl.
yeah, let's see the inside from the top. Yeah,
Okay.
from that area, that angle.
Yeah.
That's within the bowl itself.
Yeah.
So because we done examine underneath the basin, but we have to observe and appreciate the inner part of the basin or the inner part of the pelvic floor muscles.
So again, that's that pubococcygeus muscle dealing with the positioning of the fetus head, that whole supporting the prostate, etc. And then again, from this angle here, we've got the iliococcygeus. We've got all these internal muscles which are just basically helping support everything, preventing the prolapse of the organs, helping the whole digestion process, the defecation, the urinary process. It's really, really key. I'm going to go into it in a little bit more.
All right.
Into the other slides as well. Let me just getting used to navigating around Zoom again. Let's see here. Okay. Slideshow. What you can't see from my side, I've got all the Zoom tabs, and so all the buttons are really hiding away from me. So I have to constantly move things across the screen just to be able to see what I'm doing. All right. So,
Yeah.
all right. So, as I said, we've got the pelvic floor muscles. We can separate them into two distinct parts. One, the levator ani, consisting of the puborectalis. With the software I was using, I think that's an American software, so that same area was a puboanalis. But I'm not going to go into too much detail into the anatomy. All there is two distinct parts: the levator ani, consisting of these muscles, and the coccygeus muscle. So, in terms of when we're looking at the puborectalis, again, that's controlling that whole, not just fecal continence, but a part of it supports our urinary continence. So part of the puborectalis actually wraps around a little bit of our opening, so, of the urethra, and that actually helps to maintain and preserve our urinary continence as well. Again, when we see these muscles getting weak, even things like, which we go into a little bit more detail, but things like sneezing can cause a little bit of urine being leaked. So it's really, really important to understand these muscles, as we will see, and keep them strong. Pupococcygeus muscle, again, supporting the vagina, the prostate, aiding in ejaculation, and as we said, if assist with the positioning of the fetus head. And the iliococcygeus muscle, part of that, again, that levator ani, which is that whole system there, it really helps to anchor the pelvic floor, just to stabilize the area. And then we got the coccygeus. Again, think of, when you're really bursting to go to the toilet, how you're not only just recruiting these muscle fibers, but you're recruiting that whole system, and that's when the abdominal pressure really increases. So, okay, so to gain a little bit more perspective on understanding of the pelvic floor muscles, it's really interesting to understand the problems. And like most things in life, the yin and the yang, the good and the bad, we understand the vital role of an organ once there's a problem. So many people that come to me or Sahu, it's only when you've fractured your foot do you then appreciate actually how much of a role the foot plays. You know, we take everything for granted. And the pelvic floor muscle is, I think, one of the most underappreciated muscle in our body.
Yeah.
In terms of in terms of my understanding of every other part of the human body, you know, being someone that was very much into sports, I was always interested in the quads, getting a big chest, getting the six pack. But I never really appreciated the pelvic floor muscles, even though that muscle is doing a lot for us, you know. But it's only when you understand the problem or have problems or progressing towards problems we naturally are in regards to the pelvic floor muscles and other muscles. But it's only when we really, really appreciate the problem that we can have. So today, when we're going through this, I just want you to appreciate that these problems will arise, definitely, if most of us stay on that same trajectory. Without my personal understanding of these muscles and without myself doing things like Tai Chi, you know, everyone's heading into that same fate, but we'll go on. So, when we're looking at some of the problems, there are many problems that can happen. When we're looking at any disease or any problem, also what's really important to know is that everything is on different spectrums or different continuums. So just from urinary incontinence, for example, or fecal incontinence, you can have other problems, you know, but we're just going to look at some of the root problems and kind of categorize some of the root problems, just to give a basic understanding. But, you know, when we're looking at, for example, prolapse organs, which I'm going to go to in a little bit more detail, you can have various names for different organs that prolapse. So not only is it key to just focus on all the different problems, sometimes it's more important just to focus on the disease itself. Sorry, not the disease itself, but the solution itself. Because when you focus more on the solution, that's when you're tackling all the problems. So you don't have to hold yourself and learn all these different problems. You just have to focus on keeping the muscles strong, relaxed, loose, healthy, and then you'll be fine. So let's look at aging and pelvic organ prolapse. So basically, when we're looking at the pelvic floor, let me just go back to one of my slides. So prolapse, one or more of these organs start to prolapse through the pelvic floor just because of the weakness of the pelvic floor. It is something very common. And it is something very common as we start to age, yeah? Because there's things that happen when we age. So we know that by the age of 80 years old, there's a lot of research which is showing that 50% of skeletal muscle, the mass, is basically lost. You know, we get a 50% in change, things are becoming a little bit weaker, yeah? As the pelvic floor becomes weaker, they start to, you know, the bowl that we showed in the 3D image, that becomes a little bit more saggy. It is very, very, very common in more women than men. And part of that is because women are going through the whole childbirth process. What we do know with the childbirth process and the way it happens is with all of our other health problems, you know, there's a lot more trauma involved. because there's a lot of things that we don't do. We're not stretching as much. Even the way we sit on the toilet nowadays, instead of original way, a full squat, literal squat, knees bent at full 130 degrees, we're sitting with only that 90 degrees, so the strength is, as strong, we're not using muscles, we're sitting more. All of these things are even leading to premature weakness, which are leading to our organs becoming a little bit more prolapsed, etc. Interesting, there's about like 200,000 women, and I believe that is in, I think that's the statistics in the UK. I need to double check. I believe that is, I think in America it's a lot more, but on anyone's book in any country, I mean, basically there is a lot of women undergoing surgery just because of pelvic organ prolapse. I've seen patients myself with similar problems, and when I'm looking at them, the whole root cause of it is their pelvic floor muscle has always been weak. Not just their pelvic floor muscles, but their core muscles have been, extremely weak. And it leads to these problems, So when we're looking, let's just see here. This is like the normal anatomy here. What we can see here is, again, what I was saying about the different names. So these are basically different names. So you've got cystostele or the retostele or the uterine prolapse. Again, same problem, weakness of the pelvic floor, different parts being affected, they're named differently. Yeah. But that's one of the problems that can happen. Again, when you've got a problem like a retocele, that will affect, a person's sex life, definitely, because as you can see here, it is having an impact on, the vagina there. Okay, so when we're looking at some of the risk factors, and the one that I've definitely seen is some type of surgery around the pelvis and the pelvic floor, etc. Some type of surgery that will lead to the weakening of the core. I've seen in some cases where you've had someone who's had even things like liposuction, which has led to extreme weakness of the pelvic floor because of the follow-up, and not necessarily them not acknowledging the importance, but the way our healthcare system is designed on kind of projecting the importance, the follow-up. I probably would say care, the follow-up care probably wasn't there or wasn't as emphasized. And it's because, when we look at pelvic floor or women's health and stuff like that, it's not appreciated until there's a problem.
Yeah.
Things like excessive straining, constipation, these things can, affect and weaken the pelvic floor. Coughing, again, stressing, part of the stress incontinence, stressing the pelvic floor muscles, that can lead to the weakening of the pelvic floor. Manual work, lifting things with bad technique, lifting things in a wrong way. Again, all these things can lead to the weakening of the pelvic floor. And we've got here obesity, the extra weight one carries, the extra fluid one carries in the system. Again, all of these things are putting pressure on weakening the pelvic floor.
So Christos,
When we're looking at yes.
True, someone just asked, and just mentioned women. Do you think women, when training in the gym, because Jamie was saying how lifting too many heavy weights is not good for a woman when training in the gym. What do you think about that concept there?
Yeah. I think the thing with women and lifting
Heavy weights.
okay, we can break this into different ways. A woman who knows how to train in the gym, properly, they're loading their body in proportionate ways, they're never really going to get so much of these problems. I think women are a little bit better in regards to men, just
I think women are better off.
holistically.
I think women are better off with the pelvic floor generally. I think they're far
Yeah,
more stable. But I
yeah.
wonder if because we abuse it in the sense of women sitting on bikes to ride bike and them thing there, sitting on
Mm,
hard, because men's a bit different when it comes to sitting on that space there.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
men is a
yeah,
bit different because the way in which the shaft of the penis and the muscles around that, we have a little bit more muscle going on, extending
yeah,
from,
yeah.
so we can contract more and hold more and be more stable. But if a woman not
Mm,
holding herself properly, so I think maybe the transition.
yeah, yeah. No, I think you're right. I think the risk factors for women getting problems if they're not doing the right thing is they're going to be at high risk.
Safer. Yeah,
If,
they're
yeah,
definitely a higher
if,
risk.
if you get a woman who's just lifting heavy weights, who's not really appreciating the pelvic floor, then you can, when you couple that with things like childbirth in the future, when you couple that with other, then that can lead to these situations, you know. In regards to men lifting very heavy in the gym and stuff like that, the problem you usually see are things such as, slip disc. The problem with a lot of these conditions is that people, especially when it comes to the pelvic floor and any problem of the pelvic floor, is people are less likely to seek help for these problems. You know, you're going to get people less likely to say, I've got a problem with my groin area, so I've got a problem with incontinence.
True.
So then when you're looking at that and looking at the studies, you're seeing that there's an underrepresentation of people with problems. So there could be a lot more people suffering from these problems by going to the gym.
I think there is a lot more people. And then when I go through people's body, they may come with a shoulder issue or they come with a ankle or something else, let's say. And then because we do a whole body treatment anyway, we don't just treat the part of the body, which is the area that's the complaint, and we just assess everything. It is, the percentage is so high of I'll say men having real groin restriction, women, but not to the same degree. Not to the same level. I find that women are far more flexible in the groin, but then that
Yeah.
tension for the men can lead to prostrate problem. That groin tension over 5-10 years, and then do a few heavy or a few activities that strain the area. Then, as Christoph was describing about the space prolapsing or dropping, which is just repetitive strain, the
Yeah,
area
yeah.
getting weak and not being able to hold the organs in place. Yeah, man. That repetitive strain is from the pulling as well from the inner groin muscles, from the
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Because even in the I don't want to go back on it because I will lose this presentation and mess up there. But you
flow.
can see how, you've got the pelvic floor muscles, you've got the fascia, and then you've got all the muscles surrounding it. And we know we will do a presentation on fascia actually because it's so interesting. But you can see with the fascia, it's so interwoven with all the muscles, creating this whole sheet, a whole system that if you get tightness in your adductors, you're going to have problems and tightness in the pelvic floor, And, I know this from the clients that I see, and I know that from, personal experience of the tightness in the adductors by overdoing it in the gym. So these things are, if you examine your body in a certain way, you will feel and you will see the link for yourself.
Yeah.
But it's just gradually becoming more aware. And I would say Tai Chi has helped in that whole
These are,
awareness.
they do give clarity. Tai Chi, yoga, Pilates, those arts, because they slow down a little bit. They make you look into your body as opposed to doing a cardiovascular activity where you're feeling the adrenaline flow through your body, but not really connecting with the body. Someone has asked, oh, that can you explain how coughing causes problems?
Yeah. So, okay, yes.
That's what you're
Okay,
going
let
into
me
next,
go
isn't it?
back. I haven't really specified that in the presentation, but I can explain here. Let me move this over. Uh, uh, let me play from here. So, interestingly enough, so you know when we were saying about basically the core muscles, the transverse abdominals, the diaphragm, the pelvic floor, and the multifidus. When we're looking at the whole process of breathing in and breathing out, we're getting the contraction and the relaxation of the diaphragm. When we're coughing a lot, we're increasing that intra-abdominal pressure. And by increasing that pressure, that can cause a strain, because what's happening at this side, as we're breathing in, everything that's expanding is happening on the other side as well. What's happening on this side when we get the contraction, we're getting the contraction here as well. Yeah. So when we're coughing and repetitive coughing, and we're not talking about normal coughing, but we're talking about that heavy duty coughing, you know, you can increase the pressure to such a degree where you're stressing the pelvic floor muscles, which is causing some of that incontinence. Because the more we stress this pelvic floor muscle, the less, you know, the less integrity it has, which can cause a bit of the urine to leak out, etc. So that is basically how.
So we're looking at, yeah, a strain in it through the coughing, repetitive coughing strains the tissue. Repetitive strain cause scar tissue, these things, which make an imbalance in the tissue structure.
Yes.
And which makes the muscle spasmodic, which is an important thing to understand. That coughing makes muscle spasmodic, and it would affect the diaphragm on the top, but underneath, it's like it will create what Christos has been describing: weakness in the pelvic floor, because it's like the thing drop out itself every time you cough. The thing just drop down. If you don't hold it up here when you cough, like contract the pelvic floor, then cough, it's going the other way, and that is the strain. That's the strain there.
And remember, we've got all these organs inside that space as well. So it's not just like looking so empty, like, you know,
how we just,
what's portrayed in the diagram.
Space,
so, you know, as one thing pushing and pulling, you're getting the shift, you know, of the organs, a bit of the fascia as well. And then that weight alone can start to stress the pelvic floor muscles. Before we went on, I think I'm losing track of what slide I was at.
Oh, you was on that one before.
So where am I now?
Where is that one that you was at?
Let's see in the chat. Does anyone, where did I leave
You went
off?
on that slide. Go back. You was on the slide that said 2,000. No, 200,000.
Okay.
I don't know. Let me move this thing out of the way because I can't even see properly. There you go.
Now I'm going up and down. Apologies.
Yeah, here you were. No, hold on. No. You went past this.
Okay. Rima said women have menstrual cycle and childbirth that directly affect the integrity of the muscles over time. Definitely. Okay, I think I went through that one. Am I going? No, I'm going back up. Just after 4 picks. Okay. Oh, okay. So we're just after this one, I believe. Going down. Okay.
Yeah, this is the one.
Yeah, so I mentioned that, I believe. I'll just quickly go through it. So
no, really, you can move on from that one there because you've discussed that one.
Yeah. Okay, let me just point to this diagram then. So we've got the stress incontinence here, which is to do with, you know, the pelvic floor. We've got different type of incontinence. So we've got urge incontinence. So it's not to be confused. And then this is when we get this contraction of the muscles of the bladder, which can make one feel like they need to go to the toilet. So that's different from what we're talking about. We're talking about the stress incontinence, which is to do directly with the pelvic floor. Right.
Probably got about another 5 minutes or so if we stretch.
Yeah, we're nearly there, nearly there. Again, I think we spoke about urinary incontinence, so they're fine. So fecal incontinence, again. So when we're looking at fecal incontinence, it's anything to do with, the stools and our inability to control the stools. Again, we can link this back into aging because we can see that most people living in nursing homes have this type of problem. And any healthcare professional that's worked in nursing homes, you realize that they're basically a high prevalence. When you get the pelvic floor muscles becoming a little bit weak, again, you get things like the retocils, which is to do with the bowels a little bit pushing onto the vagina, as we explained before. And also you get this ineffective ability to pass out the stool. So sometimes it can lead to it kind of sitting in the area and not being controlled. So, you can have accidents. Or again, it can lead to a bit of constipation because that whole movement is not so smooth or controlled with the pelvic floor muscles. And then that can have a knock-on effect on straining, etc. So, right. So again, more common in women for the above reasons said before. And yeah, a lot of the risk factors are similar because we are talking about the pelvic floor muscles. So anything that's weakening the pelvic floor muscles is going to increase the risk. What we didn't talk about is like neurological conditions. So even one's ability, if any of the nerves which go to the pelvic floor muscles are disconnected, again, you're going to have some type of incontinence, urinary or fecal incontinence. Yeah. Again, so when we're looking at the pelvic floor muscles in a nutshell and sexual dysfunction in men, the pelvic floor muscles help to trap the blood basically in the penis. And by doing this, it allows, a man to stay erect. Anytime you get where the blood flow to the penis is being compromised because of weakness in the pelvic floor muscles, you get, things like erectile dysfunction, etc. Again, did I miss that? I think one of them cut out, but I'll talk about it anyway. I don't know where it disappeared to. It was my last slide anyway. But again, with females, you get the dysfunction in the sense of, again, when you get things like retocils pushing onto the vagina, that causes problems. Also that, the orgasm, etc., and the contraction of the pelvic floor to support that. If these muscles are not working properly, then there can be some dysfunction in women in that sense. Again, when we're looking at the whole childbirth process, we can see that the whole childbirth process can cause problems. Sometimes there might be trauma, which can weaken the pelvic floor muscles and, cause prolapse, etc. And if these things are not corrected, that leads to other further things, such as back pain, pain in the pelvic region, and all of these plethora of things. Again, pain is another problem with the pelvic floor muscles. Any of these things that we spoke about can cause pain. Yeah, so that's the pelvic floor dysfunction and anatomy in a nutshell from my side. And I will pass you over to Sahu.
All right, thank you, Christos. It looks like I'll be expanding what you've been talking about, taking it into ways to strengthen. Because next week we'll be going to some more exercises and sit up. What do you say about sit up and strengthening the pelvic floor, Christos?
I would say I think there's core exercises that you do before the sit up. I think it's really about more the awareness. Once you become aware of the pelvic floor muscles, then every other thing that you do, tied in with the breathing, is just going to be a lot more productive.
Once you, as Chris has said, connect to the pelvic floor becomes something that you utilize in every activity. So myself personally, in everything that I'm doing, moving, standing, walking, yeah, my pelvic floor is in contact. I'm aware of it. If I sit down, let's say, in the last couple of minutes, and even the last 5 minutes, I've contracted my pelvic floor quite a few times already. And it's like it's a residual signal that just goes around my head. That every so often my body just activates the area. It's like a pump. Yeah. So let me go into what we're discussing now. The reason why I do that, then this is what we're going to go into. This is why I do that kind of practice. The alchemy. All right, so let's go into my presentation. Oh dear, what's this? Yeah, as Chris was saying, got all these things in the way.
It's to your left.
Oh my gosh, yeah. How do I ever get rid of this little thing here? Oh, okay, no, there it's gone. All right, no, it was just the chat thing I had up. All right, so let's get into this alchemy of the pelvic floor. So there's a few questions that I wanted to ask, that I want everyone just to think about and reflect on for a few moments in relation to the pelvic floor. So what roles, and you can answer if you can put a one or two answer in there. What roles do you know or believe the pelvic floor plays in your everyday life? What does the pelvic floor do in our everyday life and activity? You can, what you believe to be so, or what you know to be so. I mean, Christos gave us a whole heap of different things. Yeah, we got any answers there? I give.
Yeah, so let's see what we got. We got pee and poop.
Yeah, straight to the.
Pee and poop and sex.
Well, I'm glad that somebody's awake. You know what I'm saying? It's definitely involved in them activity there.
Okay, right. So we got controlling the urine flow and Miss Oswald.
Definitely. Because that is one of the things, that activities that we suggest to do when we're trying to activate up our or get a connection with our pelvic floor. That when we're going toilet and we're weeing, the initial part of the outflow, you would contract your pelvic floor, stop the flow, and then release it again. I wouldn't suggest you do this near the end of your flow. Because if you do that near the end of the flow and there's a little bit left, it's like you have to kickstart and push and relax for that remainder to come out, and you also sense it in there. So it's really trying to get it in the initial aspect of it.
Support, Sophia, say supporting our organ.
Yeah, man. All right, let's move on to the next one. Do you think that there's an effect, does it affect your mental or emotional well-being? We can just have a yes or a no.
We got one yes. We got one no. We got another yes, 2 yeses, 1 no.
Yeah, give it a few more seconds. Yeah, you want to answer some of that one there, Christos? Oh, yeah, you see everyone, yeah.
Everyone's saying we got more yeses. Yeah, I definitely believe it affects your mental, emotional. I mean, just the mere fact of intimacy for a lot of people is, something that's so emotional. And then again, Sylvia's put a nice comment here earlier, actually. She said that the problem often stops people to maintain active lifestyle because they are ashamed about, things when there are simple solutions such as exercises.
Yeah, that's it. That's the truth there. That's beautiful. All right, let's move on to the next one then. What role do they play in menopause and retention, this journey? For because you know menopause, that whole childbirth, and then our monthly cycle is all involved in this, and also men in the science of retention.
Mhm.
You can say yes or no. Do we think it plays an important role in this?
We've got yes.
Yeah, because we want to make sure that everyone is
3 yeses,
yeah,
4 yeses.
yeah, man. Yeah. All right. Let's move on to the next one. Your performance. Do you think that it had a positive effect during from fitness to work? I mean, Jamie gave a lovely talk at the Wellness Weekender, a description of the effects holding the pelvic floor has had during his training.
So we got yeses.
Yeah, man. All right. So a few more seconds. And then last one. Well, this is a bit more different. What power do you believe is within the pelvis? What is the hidden power hidden within there? What force occupies this space?
Life force. We got Rima said life force. We got support from Stefan. Energy from Sophia.
Yeah.
Stabilizes from Annette. Stability from Sylvia.
Because it is
Energy
an aspect of our
Ras. Yeah.
yes. Oh, beautiful. Because the power of the pelvis is, in a lot of sense, what we've just mentioned here. It does control and manipulate our emotional and mental state. That is one of its powers. It does play an integral role in everyday activity, which balances our vitality, let's say. So it enters into this life essence, this life energy, this energetic aspect of our being. So we're going to touch into this now. This is what we're going to get into. So we have different cavities in the body, and as we go through the months, we'll be discussing different aspects, different cavities. But at the moment, we're right at the bottom, this pelvic cavity. And when you're looking at this whole space here, from the thoracic, the abdominal to the pelvic, this whole space, it's a whole compression system, a whole compression.
The compression system.
Did I say that word? That word felt like I said it wrong. It's like a balloon, or a balloon filled with air, and it has to be even all the way around. If a one part gets soft or is not toned or held tightly, then the rest of the balloon just goes floppy, and then that causes illness or imbalance through the whole of the system. We're at the bottom. So Krista showed us a beautiful with his app of the pelvic floor integrated with the pelvis, but this is it just isolated. So even with the male, you can see how it connects into the penis at the shaft, and for the females, how it surrounds the vagina and the anus. It's like literally. So when we men contract the space, that's why the whole penis would rise upwards and pull back. It pulled back because you're contracting from the anal part where the hole is to the base. So it pulls, it tightens in that space. Therefore, the rest of the penis will come down, but then the tip of the penis doesn't, like an upward kind of motion at the top, in the upside of it. Yeah, so it has this kind of circular kind of contraction motion when you were doing this for male. For females, it's more contracting into a space. Even though you will get the same circular rhythmic sensation when you're doing it. You're contracting of your pelvic floor. Because a lot of the time when it's contracted, the anal sphincter is focused on too much. Therefore, you can cause a strain of that area there. So the idea is to really contract the space gently. This is a further look from behind on the right hand side. So we have the coccyx at the top, on the left and on the right for the male and the female, the anus. So this is behind, from behind. And on the left, you can see how the muscle extends further. So this is really important. So this is a reminder of how everything looks. But with this space here, this coccyx space, we have the nerves descending down into the sacrum. And as the nerves descend down into the sacrum, they fan out, let's say about, what is it, L3 in the lumbar spine. Let's say just beneath the belly button, around the space here, is when they start to individualize. Cauda equina represents me like hair, like a horse's tail. So the strands are many as they descend down into now the sacrum, into the sacral space. Into the sacrum itself, this is the sacral plexus of nerves, so inside, and then they descend down into the femoral nerve, into the sciatic nerve, a lot of us know. But it's really important to appreciate how at the rear aspect of the pelvis, all these nerves coming down, and it's important for the alchemy that we're practicing. So we're, at the moment, aware that we are contracting our pelvic floor, and we are, while we're doing this, stimulating nerves and contracting nerves and releasing nerves as well. The purpose of all of this is to create what in Tai Chi or Qigong we call it the cosmic embryo. That's why females are a little bit more fortunate when we come into training the pelvic floor and lower dantian. These two spaces are connected in this internal alchemy. So if I just go through these diagrams and to give us appreciation of this particular, so we have various techniques that we can utilize to strengthen and tonify the pelvic floor. The main one we would use is this actual technique here, what we call holding the one. While holding the one, the idea here is to have a slight subtle tone with your anal sphincter. And then just ahead of that space, you're thinking of this perineum area, which Christos actually didn't mention. The perineum, of all the ones that you mentioned, you never mentioned that one there. The perineum is like between the, this is probably better. So on the left-hand side, let's say, where you have the base of the penis and you have the muscle that attaches going into that base there. On the right-hand side for the female, where you have around the anal sphincter, and then or the anus, and then you have an ascending muscle that goes into the vagina. Right, so those two spaces that go up forward, around that space is what we're referring to as the perineum. This is the space that we're actually focusing on in our mind's eye to contract. And the more you practice this, the easier it gets to actually to contract and make a connection with it. Initially though, you'll be contracting everything and pulling everything up and in. And that's all right to do because we're awakening the space. So this, now, when we're practicing our internal breathing or our Neidan practice in Tai Chi, we engage this pelvic floor so then we can support the flow of cerebral spinal fluid, as well as the flow of blood, as well as the flow of the lymphatic system. And there are truly two practices, or no, there's more than two. Let's say there's two rhythms that we're following. In this rhythm here, the microcosmic orbit is when you're starting from your navel and you're going to your sexual organs, perineum, and this is a thing in your mind's eye that you're connecting with all these different points as you're breathing in and as you're breathing out. And it's like, in a sense, a reverse cycle or a reverse process, going up the back and then down the front. And I say that because I'm only connecting this to the flow of cerebral spinal fluid. I'm going to come back to this in a second. So then, hopefully here everyone is aware of what cerebral spinal fluid is. So cerebral spinal fluid is a fluid that is released from the fourth ventricle, and it comes out within the center part of the brain, and then it cycles around, if you can see on the left, on the outside of the skull, and then it goes back into the brain, then it comes down. Now, the thing is, depending upon our heart rate, whether the pressure, the blood's being released, or the pressure is being held in the heart, determines how the cerebral spinal fluid is flowing, whether it's flowing down the back or up the back. So it's actually, the flow is dictated by our heart. There are other aspects that dictate the flow, but because of this, it's not always flowing the same direction. The cerebral spinal fluid isn't always flowing down like the back, let's say the back of the spine. And it's not always flowing down the front. The thing is, it drops 2 different angles from the front, from the top of the head, sorry, from the base of the neck. Either it's going to go down the back of the cervical or down the front of the cervical, depending upon whether the heart is pumping out blood or whether it's not pumping out blood. So because of this, because we're breathing, doing a reverse cycle back up, then we are sometimes counterflowing. So the reason why I would say that there are 2 techniques that we're focusing on, and the other one we talk about is sinking chi, and sinking chi is what we're going to cover our next one in 2 weeks, next month. We'll go through the anatomy of the core with a bit more description to this. But
and it's just reminding the importance of the cerebral spinal fluid, because remember that thing that provides nourishment to your spinal brain, prevent some of the friction going on. When who is talking about the cerebral spinal fluid, it's just for you to put in content how important it is, because there's many conditions out there where if that cerebral fluid is blocked or not flowing properly, you can get a lot of neurological disorders.
yeah, that's the problem. It does because it nourishes the spinal cord itself, and it has a direct connection with the lymphatic system and the blood system. Because it is also in research found to be, let's say, like the pineal gland, how the pineal gland, we thought the pituitary gland was the conductor. But you come to find out, sir, that it's the pineal gland is the one that's conducting. Then the pituitary gland is the one that's receiving that information and then is sending out. So you can say you got 2. One that relays information to somebody, and then that one relays information out. Same with this cerebral spinal fluid. It's just the main conductor of all the waterways in the body. Every liquid that flows through the system is controlled and dictated by the cerebral spinal fluid. So it has a pulse. When this pulse is out of phase or out of rhythm, then we have this stuff that Christos just mentioned, a lot of neurological issues starting to arise. And they can be from the cord of the quina itself, or it can be cardiac plexus, brachial plexus, it can be any solar plexus, it can be enteric plexus. Well, they don't call it the enteric plexus. They should do. They call it the enteric.
Even simply, which is easier to see, when a man loses a seed, they're showing that the cerebral spinal fluid, part of that is also emitted, because it provides nourishment for, reproduction, etc. And then what are the symptoms? Things like lightheaded, dizzy, weakness, fatigue, a little bit slow, a little bit blurred vision, all of these things is what's experienced on a more practical daily level of human existence.
That's why the body can't truly be isolated, and everything has to be connected to have a good overview or a good understanding. So we are talking of the sacrum and the pelvic area, because the sacrum is housed in this space. But this cranial sacral pump, this cranial sacral connection is really important, and it's the pelvic floor that really is supporting this function here. You know how at the beginning Christos showed how you had the muscles attaching into the coccyx, and the coccyx itself is attaching to the sacrum. So when you're contracting that space, you're actually contracting and moving the sacrum. Why? The reason why this is important, because if you look on the right hand side, you can see that on the right, the red represents, or the scale is showing pressure. So when we have this red stuff, it shows that the pressure is really low. When it goes up to the blue, purple, then we know, say, the pressure is higher pressure. So if you see, it shows that generally at the sacrum area, at the bottom of the cerebral spinal fluid, the pressure is low. It is almost like, I love the way I give these tangents, but it's almost like the calf muscle. Because you know the calf muscle, you know what I'm saying? It's like, they call that the second heart. But it's the way in which the valve closes is like you have to have an active calf to actually pump the blood, to support the pumping of the blood back to the heart. This is the thing. So because everything is dealing with pressure, we have to support it coming back up. And this is the pelvic floor contraction now. This is the inner alchemy that's working. Through contracting pelvic floor, we're getting benefits from stabilizing your urethra, your rectum, your bladder, all these internal organs, your uterus, all these spaces, organs are being affected. But the hidden stuff now, as we into internal alchemy, is this aspect here, which is the inhibiting the flow of cerebral spinal fluid. And it's actually a little bit more important than this. There is something else that's a little bit more important than just purely cerebral spinal fluid. The beauty of it, though, I think it's on the next one, where it mentions how they have the electrolytes within it. So cerebral spinal fluid is almost like plasma itself. We can call the cerebral spinal fluid plasma fluid that is surrounding the spine. It's just a transparent liquid that hasn't got a hemoglobin or an iron in it. That stuff is out. It has less protein, or it's free of protein, and it just has a few minerals in there, electrolytes, because the few minerals is like the chlorine levels are quite high. Sodium levels are equivalent to that of blood as well. So this plasma that is circling, and plasma is a beautiful thing. We connect this to the sun. We connect plasma to this fourth phase of water, plasma water. We connect plasma to a lot of energetic or exoteric sciences. This solar light that's circulating around our spine. So if we go back now, so we're appreciating, I had to mention this to appreciate this pelvic stuff, to go where I'm going in a moment. All right. So we've got the cerebral spinal fluid flowing around the body. And it's the perineum, the pelvic floor, which is supporting the pumping of it back up. If we're pumping up, if we're pumping with intention through the organs, perineum going up the back of the spine, yeah, then we're supporting that flow. But if we're doing guarding the one, which is breathing from into the navel again, but we're actually exhaling out, let's say number 5 in this space. So we're not going down to the perineum, we're going from within the center to number 5 and going on the inside of the spine and coming up. 2 different techniques, but you see, it's like that opposite motion, that movement there is like is like causing electromagnetic friction or shifting, which amplifies the space. So we have the 2, but that second one, we're going to describe this another time. We're just going to stick with this idea of flowing through. And the both techniques here are creating this cosmic embryo, this capturing of this seed that is secreted from the pineal gland, the capturing of it as it descends down the spine, down into the pit of the body, or to the lowest aspect. Because you know, we have this enteric system, this whole abdominal space, the nerves that occupy the space. And then at the bottom, we call the perineum. But in Qigong, we call these 2 areas, one, the sea of Qi. And Qi is representing energy. So we're looking at this as a sea of energy in this navel, lower area, abdominal, whole of the small intestines and the large intestines. We refer to this as the sea of Qi. When we go into the bottom, where the perineum is, we call this the ocean bottom, the bottom of the ocean. So when the energy is descending down the spine and it enters into the bottom of the ocean, it rises back up into the sea of Qi, where it's cultivated and is allowed to grow and expand and develop. When this develops to a certain stage, there's always 2 in it. 2 things in my mind. Let's say there's one where we're going to discuss it in a moment, where it goes up into the solar plexus and expands, germinates and grows within the solar plexus space. And then the other one is what we're covering today, where it grow in the navel, in the lower dantian, in that belly space there. So the child has to expand and grow, and it's energetic, and it's the forming of a light being or a light body is what we're working on here. This is why females have it a little bit more easier. So this is what this left diagram is showing. The left diagram is showing the same thing. Even if you look far left and you don't understand the writing, yeah? And you can see where these 4 yin-yang symbols are. Then this will be same dantian on the, yeah? The second diagram probably gives this a little bit, because you can see a little bit of because these are, if we're going backwards through time, coming forward into time, let's say, one of the older diagrams of this internal alchemy. The second one is a little bit more clearer, because you know, as time goes on, we make things a little bit easier as well. The third diagram is just a straight explanation, because each one of these stages, so you see how you have like a cauldron where the lower dantian is, and then you have another one just above it, then you have one right at the top, so them are representing the 3 treasures, or the lower, middle, and upper dantian. They are what we're trying to develop. So this lower aspect, this lower cauldron, is where we're pulling all this energy into for it to overfill at some stage. And this is all supported through the pelvic floor. If pelvic floor isn't involved, this process don't work properly. If you're not contracting and holding up, if you're not, and the reason why you have to is the controlling of pressure internally through the subtle contraction and breathing, like you're shifting the pressure. Okay, on a health level, where we just went through, then this has the effect of improving motility of the small intestines. You have of the bladder movement, improved movement of all these organs down there when you are breathing and expanding energetically, because the nerves are allowed to flow, and because along the nerves you have electrons that are moving around the nerves. That's why it's amazing that we have an L tree, the way in which it span out, and then we have along each of these hair-like strands of our spinal cord, we have all the nerves that's running along there. All these, electrons. All these electrons are all getting pulled into this lower dantian space. So this is one of the practices which is really important to practice. Going through navel, your sexual organs, and this is literally breathing into the space, connecting to the life force energy, and then going through each one and breathing in and out. And there are a few different ways to appreciate this. So to allow the energy to flow around the body, to pull energy into certain reservoirs, to allow it to expand in that space, pelvic floor has to be involved. If your pelvic floor is not involved in those kind of action there, then it feels like it's like missing fire from heating up water. Like you're trying to heat up the water, but you forgot to put the stove on. This is what it come like. You're just going to be drinking cold water. The energy, it doesn't heat up. There's no friction. So energetically, again, you know, I know we talk Tai Chi most of the time, and we talk yoga or that system probably less. It's all connected. So at the sacrum, the sacral plexus is usually associated with red, and the same with the orange above. And that is because we're looking at the idea of passion, creativity, energy, drive, excitement. What color represent these things? Danger. Something that can actually make you suddenly stop. What truly represents that color in nature? So utilizing colors is quite straightforward when you understand what colors mean, or in the sense how we see it play out in the world, and reconnecting it internally to the body. So when visualizing and breathing, we can visualize a vibrant red to help to energize this space there, and that'll help to increase flow, blood flow, and energetic flow in this area. All right, so let's move into this aspect for a moment, this part. So we've just spoken about the cerebral spinal fluid, the sacrum and the pelvic floor connection in allowing the improvement of cerebral spinal fluid, harmonizing this rhythm. Okay, we know that all that is beneficial for increasing, or should I say, harmonizing blood flow, lymphatic system flow. It nourishes, protects the brain, yeah. But there is something else that happens within this space, in the cerebral spinal fluid, which is one of the truest secrets. And the secret is connected with the sacrum, this pelvic area, the wise ones. So this is when you go into astrotheology, when you start to find out some of this information here, that there is something that is secreted. There is something secreted from this fourth ventricle, it's like, they call it like an oil, and it only happens once a month. We have this secretion 4 times a month. And this secretes from this fourth ventricle, and as it trickles down, but we know it doesn't just trickle down. We know, say, that it just goes round and comes round, it goes round, then comes down. But as it trickles down through past the pons, down the cervical, and continues down the body, it ends up at the bottom or in the sacral area, this oil, this seed. Some refer to it as a seed, some refer to it like a ash, like a tar. When we say that, come like melanin, but in those script, they never really refer to use the word melanin. They use this term like ash. This is when we're talking in these occult. These are occult books, is where you're going to find that information there. So it is said that when your moon is in your sun sign, so when the moon, so in a month, there's like a 2-3 day period where if I'm born as a Virgo, let's say, and then when the moon reaches the constellation Virgo in that month, when that takes place, this is when this release happens. This is like all things resonating, or all things lining up with you, the stars, the cosmos, the planet, everything in a certain alignment for this to take place. This is usually squandered, this germ or this seed that's released. But we are looking to capture the seed as it drops down and cultivate it. And it's cultivated or it's pushed up through the contracting of the pelvic floor. It's not just the will of breath, not the will of just expanding and opening the abdominal cavity. It's the pumping of the pelvic floor in timing with lower dantian, which creates an upward flow of this oil. And it's a little denser in the fluid. So then it needs this extra support to actually go up. And this is an ancient story. So if I go for a moment. So here, we've got the various stages. So this is, gosh, it looked like I never get rid of that little thing on the other side there. We have various stages of this process. And you do find this story in most religions, interestingly enough. And this demonstration here has given the Christian connection between Mary and Joseph, between the pineal and the pituitary gland, the positive and the negative pole, oscillating at a certain time, which allowing this release of this Christos or this Christ, which drops down. And the thing is, maybe about 20 years ago, this was a really big thing in the conscious community, in the occult conscious community. We don't hear this stuff really now. When we talk about this manna in the Bible, they refer to manna from heaven dropping to the earth, and from this we could sustain life, nourish the whole being. This seed that dropped was the seed that allowed vitality to flow through the whole body, and it was looked at as an external thing. And we now say that this is actually an internal thing now. That this oil that accumulates, if we are not squandering our life force energy, if we are not drinking alcohol, the main thing seems like what that causes problem: abuse of alcohol, abuse of sex, and abuse of how you utilize your pelvic area. drugs or pharmaceutical drugs or these kind of things. So anything that ultimately causes the body to go into an acidic state has this effect as well. So this seed that drop once every month, all you have to do is go and look upon your one of those celestial charts. I remember one year I drew out a chart for I think 2 years. I mapped it out. I put the dates, and it only took me a little while to download one of these programs. I think the program I downloaded is called Stellarum. Downloaded it, and then I just went through the month, and you just see until it got into my star sign, bam. Okay, that was the date, from that date to that date, put it down. Okay, next month, done that. This is an interesting process to go through. And then when that time period comes up now, those 3-4 days, then, or 2-3 days, I should say, then you're really reviewing, for me, because it's like learning the art of pendulum and to connect with one inner being. I'm not going to, at the end, connect and maintain the use of a pendulum. I'm going to feel what it feels like. So then when this time, I don't require then, let's say, no longer writing the dates, because I spent a period of time assessing what if I felt like through that time period. So then after this now, one is more aware, because it's a nuisance to having to rely upon something external when you can actually connect internally. So that's an option there. So I think we're gonna wrap up in a few moments, and we're definitely going to expand deeper into this, because this is only one aspect of the process. And as we're only actually just dealing with the pelvic area involvement in this science here, as we go further in, we'll just be dissecting other aspects of this alchemy as well to understand the flow of energy. All right, I think we are pretty good.
Yeah,
Okay, actually, one more thing, since I'm here, you know, the image of this brain and the eyes, it's the reason why it's there is because it's this optic nerve, this optic thalamus, the optic nerve and the occipital region, the medulla oblongata, are key areas involved in this alchemy as well. But them are things that we're gonna have to cover in the future as we get deeper into understanding. All right.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you very much. Yeah, everyone looks very engaged. David put at the end, chi, C-H-I, translates to mean God from the Igbo language, native Nigerian language he's put there. So that's interesting.
Because you know, David, after I done that, I found out, I come to that, realize, or I found that out, or yeah, I went into a little bit deeper, and it means chi, but chi is the actual deity, let's say, or chi in the Igbo is like the first brother who was doing like a Christ-like character. He was like a Christ-like figure that went and healed people, done certain energetic work. So he was a deity, which fascinated me, because then you go into these other deities, and then you start entering into I don't remember their names. I need to review and go back into it. But you end up going into like how we will call it now will be the multiverse. That's right. Yeah, we'll call it the multiverse now. But deities that represent the multiverse. It's a deep thing. The mythology is powerful. I need to go back into that.
And you know, just reiterating, when so who's talking about the microcosmic orbit and things like that, these are not things that I know we've got a varied audience here, but these are things that you will only really grasp the understanding through practice,
Yeah.
and experience. You're not really going to understand it any other way.
Can't
When
talk this one out.
you can't, and it's like that saying that the things that are more kind of, say, spiritual knowledge, or when you're looking at the physical, the spiritual, and you see the mineralization of matter, or whatever you want to call it, you more have to feel it than observe it or see it or taste it or touch it. It comes from a different place. You can't describe energy. You can't describe the feel. I mean, you can describe it, but you can't measure that feeling of energy. Usually you will see it in someone else who's radiant,
Yeah.
and usually you will see it in younger people because their pelvic floor and everything, and their energetic karma is less, is more new, is closer to the source, that youth. But as one begins to lose their youth, their vitality, all negative things, it become a find a space to connect yourself. It's easy in the sense of experience. Experience should eventually bring you there,
Yeah.
but it can be the of you might have a little bit more, but through that experience of, just remembering yourself as a youth or as a child and the abundance of energy, you felt different. And that's what you want to be feeling into your adulthood, into
I
your
love that.
age.
I love that. I love that. Because I come to a clear realization. The concept of being a adult or being an adult is akin to death. Akin to death. We are always supposed to be the immortal child, from child to death, forever. We're supposed to have that innocence or that expression or that vitality, that energy. We have a perception of adults when we get to a certain age, and that's like a tree that's withering and dying, that is becoming stiff, because we see adults slow. So yeah, this concept of being an adult or being a man or a woman, in that sense there, I look at that as no, that's not the one. That's no. That is death. Personally, there are many ways of to be killed. Let's say many ways to die. There's many verbal ways to die, and there's many ways to die through intaking of food. But that one is definitely mental death. Forever a child. I say that as well because in the alchemy in Qigong, we are when we look at our organs, we look at the idea that we're trying to awaken the innocence of the child within the organ. We're trying to reconnect to that child that's in that space and allow it to illuminate through. So therefore, each organ is useful. This is the alchemy of Qigong. Radiate through your whole being.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you. I know everyone's got busy schedules and all that. Is there any questions before we sign off? There was a comment from Sophia, about a lady 6 months pregnant every night has a short pain going down her leg, possibly sciatica, and so painful can't sleep. Do you think the problem may be related to the pelvic floor? So she rephrased that. I mean, do you think the problem may be related to her pelvic floor muscles? Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, when you're looking at that whole core unit, diaphragm, pelvic floor, transverse abdominal multifidi at the back, kind of breaking that armor, and that could be through, just the pregnancy itself. When we're looking at that, it's not just the pregnancy, but the whole history of her lifestyle, depending on her age. Is she always on a computer? Is she always sitting down? Has she had, is she overweight? Has she had a bad chest? Is she was coughing? All of these things can contribute to stable that whole that core unit. So it's not just the pelvic floor, but it's any of these muscles that can link to the back pain. Because even though we're breaking it down as a pelvic floor today, really it's just that one unit. The body doesn't know the separateness of things, how we describe it.
That's right. It's one continued flow. Everything's connected. So that's why if you were to break it down in such a way, it will take a little bit longer. We want to finish like on this time in here, but we definitely touching this next month, this core, the muscles the connection. So this pelvic floor, this transverse abdominis, this diaphragm at the top, and the multifidus, the muscles at the back of the spine. But you know, Christos, enough time I'm in my mind, and I'm like, what suppose layers come out beyond? I'm like, the lumbar fascia, because it's like it's deep. Transverse abdominis. Where does that one stop and start? I'm sure that's not going into no erector spinae muscles. So anyway, we discuss that next time.
Well, what we'll do, because I can see everyone's they're saying their thank yous and their blessings. So, we will catch up with everyone for the next one. Thank you. Take what you can, and we will see you again.
2 weeks. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.